But when we come to Isaiah, we start to see, an even different era category or a different period of the life of God's people. How does Isaiah do something unique or at least distinct even among the prophets in developing this Exodus motif? And he's certainly used a lot in the New Testament in a way that the others aren't.
Yeah, I think that's great because it focuses right on a pivotal point in the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, Elder Testament. Old Testament sometimes is kind of pejorative, so Elder Testament is good. And God already had a book out before the New Testament came out. And so anyway, Isaiah, especially in chapters 40 through 55, there's a change in tone, which doesn't necessarily mean change in author, but there's definitely a change in tone in 40 through 55 and all the way up to 66. But especially in 40 through 55, that's where biblical scholars have identified what's called the Isaianic New Exodus. And they're not just trying to spin out more technical jargon. What they've noticed is, especially through the theme of the way, that God is going to do something new now. You remember this is the book of consolation. And Isaiah, in my view, is writing beforehand to what would be the exilic people and trying to prophesy encouragement to them. And so everybody will remember chapter 40, perhaps one of the high points of the Hebrew Bible, opens up, "Comfort, comfort my people." It's a beautiful, beautiful poem. Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, Yomar Elohechem. Comfort, comfort my people. Speak kindly to the heart of Jerusalem. And but there, everybody will remember in Isaiah 40, verse 3, prepare the way. And there's a constellation of verbs and nouns that are used repeatedly at high points in Isaiah 40 through 55 to express that God is going to do something new now. And so this is what we call the Isaianic New Exodus. So this is casting and putting before the people a prophetic hope. And so he talks about, Isaiah 43, don't look to the former things. I'm going to do something new. So now instead of making a way through the barrier, namely the sea, and destroying enemies and delivering his people safe out on the other side, now he's going to make a way through the desert. And he uses all this paradise language back to creation, and way constantly comes up and shows up in about 10 to 11 highly significant passages. And there's a change. So whereas wilderness and the Pentateuch in the first 5 books usually had negative connotations. Right. This is a place of testing, this is a place of temptation. Now way is taking on new meaning, so that when we get up in the New Testament, Second Temple period, we know from biblical and even extra biblical material that Isaiah 40, verse 3, for example, becomes the most important verse in Second Temple Judaism. We know this from Qumran and from Josephus. And so it's filled with anticipation and excitement because now a Messiah is going to come, a new word after God's silent. Well, if you will, that this Isaianic New Exodus is putting pressure on that period of redemptive history where there's this anticipation for something new and great to happen. So the old Exodus is fueled by the Isaianic New Exodus to become the grist for the mill or the foundation for the new Exodus, which will happen when Christ, the Messiah, comes and becomes a new Moses.
Yeah, so there's that real important and highly significant role of Isaiah there, which is unique among all the prophets. Nevertheless, we do also see new things and development with the exile and post-exilic prophets, right? Like Ezekiel and Jeremiah. How do they set the table a bit for the New Testament as well?
Yeah, great. Ezekiel, just a couple comments, is that W.D. Davies, the biblical scholar, noted years ago that Ezekiel was setting out a new Exodus, to be anticipated. And then there's been a fair amount of work since him to re-emphasize that. Simply stated, it seems like, if I could state it in general terms, what Ezekiel does is, of course, now we're in the exile, okay? So Ezekiel is the prophet during the exile that is exiled. Jeremiah, a contemporary, is the prophet during the exile who stays home, so to speak. And so Ezekiel is emphasizing what the people failed to do and could not do. Remember that way back when in Ezekiel, or in Exodus chapter 4, verse 22 and 23, Israel is called a son.
Right.
And, let my son go so he may come out in the wilderness and worship me. So the son, corporately and individually, has failed. And so now there's a need for a new son of Israel to obey. And so what you get, pretty cleanly divided in first 19, 20 chapters of Ezekiel, is a lot of judgment, motif and theme. And then 20 all the way up to the end of Ezekiel seems to be emphasizing that there's going to be a new David, a new king, a new shepherd who will come because of the new covenant that's prophesied and do what you failed to do. And so that comes up time and time again. Jeremiah, we have the shepherd motif. So remember, shepherd, these people are pastoralists, they're agriculturalists, and they are, herding their sheep and their goats. They don't do that on foot anymore. If you travel in Israel, you'll actually see them on their motorcycles and their four-wheel drive things, talking on their cell phones while they're herding their sheep and goats. It's true. And but in the old days, that's what was the case. But this language gets extended to kingship. Uh-huh. And so the kings had failed. Now we need a new king to come and a new shepherd to come. And that's the kind of language that Jeremiah picks up and says that God will bring a new shepherd for the people in the new covenant who will shepherd them and rule them and help them. The only other thing I should probably mention about Ezekiel that I failed to mention was, and that's interesting, and readers of English Bible or those that read in Hebrew will notice, there's this thing called the recognition formula. So I will do this and this and this, says God, and then they will know that I am the Lord. Well, where would you guess the two most frequent occasions for that to come up are? It's in Exodus and Ezekiel. And when you look at the statistics, it's pretty amazing. There's a really good dissertation written on this. In the Exodus period, it was all about encouragement and hope for the people. So God's going to deliver them from Pharaoh and his minions and the iron furnace of slavery, and then they will know that I am the Lord. When you get to Ezekiel, again with a high density of that I am the Lord formula, now it's all negative. In other words, you have sinned, and now I will judge you, and I will bring you into exile, and you will have to pay for your sins and your failure to obey me and my law. And then the nations round about will know I am the Lord. And so there's been a real shift there that also shows a change, an upgrade, if you will, in the use of this idiom in the Exodus motif.